All right, so we are recording now. So the first thing I'd like to do, today, of course, we're going to be talking about bones and inverse kinematics and armatures and poses and how to deal with all that stuff inside of Animate CC. So the first thing I'll show here is just the kind of finished animation that I've done. And we don't have enough time today, of course, to go through and actually do all of this stuff. But this should give you an idea of the sorts of things that we will see. So you can see here that there's basically a grave and the arm comes up, it grabs the grave and kind of rails it down into the earth, and then the being subsides, right? Then we get this little text here, Halloween 16. So this is a Halloween themed Animate CC demo. Let's have a look at how this scene was constructed first of all. And what we have here, I'll lock down all the different layers that we're not going to look at right away. For the background, we've basically got a bunch of shapes, okay? So we have the moon here, and this is a drawing object. We have the stage background, which is this nice orange color. And we have some hills in the background, which is, again, just another drawing object. In the foreground here, we have stuff that I created with the paintbrush tool. And I created this with the paintbrush tool using, here, let's unselect this stuff. So I actually used this right here, chalk blunt, to create the tree. And basically, I just changed the stroke value here so that I was able to create different sized strokes to create this nice sort of spooky branching tree. And as you can see, I've done it all in silhouette to make it simple, but it also makes it kind of striking as well. So it has two different effects there. For the ground, I started the ground just being a simple drawing object, just like the hills here, except I added with the paintbrush and this blunt vector art, just this texture of these different sort of pieces of loose earth. And in terms of the actual gravestone here, it's again in silhouette, and this is a movie clip symbol. If we go into the library, we can see we've got a number of different symbols here. We have a little piece of dirt, a little dirt clod animation, and this is a graphic symbol that I have here. And we can see this kind of come into play when the arm breaches the earth. And additionally, where is it? When the arm grabs the gravestone and pulls it down, we get some of that as well. So I'm just kind of using this same dirt graphic symbol over and over again. If you want to see how this is constructed, it's just a bunch of shape tweens where I take a bunch of clods of earth and simply, animate them. So pretty simple. If we go ahead and look and see how these are implemented here. So here's my little dirt clod. If we go into the properties panel with that selected, we can see that I've set the option for looping to play once because I only want it to play once. If I don't have it play once, it's just going to keep like a fountain spurting up clods of dirt, and that's not going to be effective at all for what I'm going for. So there's the tree, the grave, the dirt, and I have two different layers for dirt just because I like to be organized. You don't necessarily have to do that, of course. For my message here, this is just a basic motion tween. So I have a movie clip symbol that just has basic text in it, so H16. And I'm actually just modifying the alpha channel here. So inside the color effect for my movie clip symbol, I just modify the alpha channel from 0 to 100. And I also have a blur property here, so I blur it in from 14 pixel blur over onto this keyframe down here to a 1.2 pixel blur. So it's important to be precise on these things, right? Got to have that 1.2. I'm sure 1 would be just fine. And lastly, what we have here, it's my wrong scroll bar. Lastly, we have our skeleton armature, which is the highlight of this demo. So we can see here that we have the armature kind of grasp up from the earth, and then it grabs the gravestone and then yanks it down pretty quickly. And then he sort of says, see you later, bye-bye. And he goes away. So this is sort of the finalized version of that. Let's actually go into a version which doesn't have any of that stuff constructed so that we can see how an armature is actually made. So here I have, as you can see, a number of different movie clip symbol instances. This is something that I imported from Illustrator. It's just some basic vectors in the shape of a hand and a skeletal forearm and a skeletal upper arm. And if we go into the library, we can see those here. So skeletal arm L for lower, skeletal arm U for upper, and skeletal hand. So those are our movie clip symbols, and we also have the grave as well as a movie clip symbol. So we are most concerned about the skeleton, so I'm just going to lock the grave layer here. And the first thing we want to do is actually arrange these bones to exactly how we want them to appear. So maybe instead of actually replicating what I just did, maybe we can do something fun with the tree and actually make one of the tree branches an arm, a skeletal arm. So if you'll notice with the free transform tool, we're able to click and drag upon the transform point, which is this white dot here. And note as well, you can see this little crosshair and the white dot. Normally they're both positioned at the same exact place. However, they are two distinct properties for a symbol like this. The crosshair represents the registration point. So if we enter the symbol, the crosshair represents the 0x and 0y positioning of this guy. So right now it's just set at the center for it, and that's fine. We don't really care that much about it in that case. However, the transform point is very important. This is the actual point upon which, if we do any sort of rotations and things like that, the transform point is what determines where those rotations kind of pivot around. So it's important where we place this. I'm going to place it up at the joint here. And then with the free transform tool hovered over the edge, you'll notice I can then rotate this around that transform point. So let's go ahead and just kind of plunk this guy into the tree here. Next, we have this lower arm. I'm going to move the transform point there as well so that we're able to transform that. And then I'll manually just kind of shift that around a little bit with the keys on my keyboard here until it's something like that. Going to do the exact same thing with the hand. So move the transform point over to the wrist, position, and rotate. There we go. So that's an odd tree branch, right? And the tree branch itself still isn't using bones at all, of course. These are just movie clip symbols that are positioned at different places with their transform points. So if I try and move these like this, it's just going to move the instance. It's not going to be using an armature in any way. So to actually use an armature, what I'm going to do is use the bone tool. So this is found right here inside of the tools panel. We have the bone tool. And in order to use the bone tool, you need either shapes or movie clip symbol instances like this. Since I have movie clip symbol instances, I can then link them together with different bones by clicking and dragging. You can see now I haven't created a bone yet exactly, but and of course I'm trying to point to this and you can't see what I'm pointing at because this is pointed at me. So that big white thing with the red diamond around it is kind of like the tail of our entire armature. So this is the bone which all other bones kind of sprout from. And that's an important thing to recognize when you're dealing with armatures and inverse kinematics inside of Animate. So what I need to do is pull this. I've created the origin point for this armature. Now I need to pull this bone onto a different movie clip symbol. And I'm going to pull it right into the elbow joint right here. And you can see that we now have one bone that originates on this movie clip symbol and attaches to this one at this particular point. And this will modify your transform point if you haven't modified it already. I already moved it over there, but the way bones work is that they actually will shift. They will connect at different transform points. So that's why that's so important. Next, I'm going to click on the previous joint that I created. And you can see I can now move this around to select an additional movie clip symbol. I'm going to select the wrist right here. And there it's attached to the wrist. And now I'm able to actually go ahead and click on this and kind of drag it around, right? And as you've probably seen if you've attempted the exercise already, when you initially create an armature like this, it tends to be a little goofy, right? You can just kind of like collapse it all over itself. It's a little wonky. So there are constraints that you can use on particular bones. So one thing you can always do is just disable rotation altogether on a bone. So you can see what this does is it actually disables rotation entirely for that particular bone. However, another thing you could do is enable the rotation but constrain it. So we constrain this here, and this is going to be really hard to see over Connect probably, but you've got this little arc here, and as I mouse over it, other controls appear that obscure the arc. So I'll try not to do that, but you've got this little arc, and it's kind of shaped like two little lines going out with an arc between them. And the way that you control the constraints is through here. So as I actually shift these offsets left and right, you can see the arc modifies to match. So if I wanted to constrain it to the face of the tree so that it can't move beyond the trunk of the tree, I can do it exactly like that. And now when I move this, you can see that it never goes beyond the trunk of the tree, right? And you can do the same thing to this bone here. So this one right here, it's all open. You can see this big circle. If I move this guy, I can move him 360 degrees. It's not very realistic. Yet I can select that bone and choose to constrain rotation and then modify those rotation parameters, those values. So both the right and the left offset. And I'll probably want to keep them fairly open. So something like that. And now I'm able to do this, and you can see that it stops like right there. Just like a normal human arm would, right? I mean, you can't really, well, I guess you sort of can a little more, but you know, you can tweak this to be as realistic as you want. It's a skeleton, it's probably pretty dry. Maybe he can't get that to work exactly. So I'm going to stretch this arm out again, and you know, the hand can pretty much go wherever. I don't care where it goes. However, if you wanted to actually make some sort of constraints on the hand, you can see there's no bone to the hand right now. So there's this trick that people use, and that is to create a ghost movie clip, okay? And the way you do that is, let's see, my properties panel here. I have my oval tool, and I'm going to select just a kind of garish green color here so that it stands out a lot. You just create something like that, so just a circle or whatever. And then you go ahead and turn this into a movie clip symbol. So I'm going to modify, convert to symbol. I'm going to call it ghost. It's a movie clip symbol. And what I'll do is actually go ahead now and choose my bone tool again. Select this armature and then drag out an additional bone that goes from the wrist to this green ghost, right? So at this point, I can now select the bone that controls the hand and I can constrain that. So it's constrained to 45 degrees left and right. That's probably a little too conservative. Let's move that a bit. Something like that. And now, you know, it's constrained for sure, right? Maybe a little too much, but that's okay. So you might be wondering, okay, well, that's great, Joseph, but now I've got this ugly green ball that we're using here. And there's two ways of dealing with the ghost ball here. One way is to actually just turn its alpha property all the way down, and then you won't see it anymore. An additional way is inside the library, go into the ghost, select it, and when you define the alpha for, or the color properties for this particular shape, you can of course always take alpha down to 0. And either way, you're not going to see that ghost anymore, okay? And then you can just go ahead and manipulate these bones however you want. Now there are some particular shortcut keys you can use to constrain bones. So if I hold down Shift and then click and drag, this will isolate the movement to only the specific bone that you're clicking on. So that's Shift as a modifier key. If I want to go ahead, and as we mentioned before, the bones are pinned to the transform point. So if I go ahead and move the transform point with the transform tool, you can see now the bone's all jacked up, right? So we don't want to do that. But that is how you would fix a bone as well that had the improper pinning of the bone itself, right? So there's some other neat things you can do with an ActionScript 3 document type like this that don't particularly go with the assignment. However, it's something neat that I would like to let you all know about. And that is if we actually select the armature, so this green layer here, you can see that we have an IK armature selected. So an armature, you can think of an armature animation very much like a motion tween or classic tween. It appears as its own specific layer with its own specific icon type. And what you have is this kind of green coloring here. I'm going to expand my layers out using F5 so you can see that much better. You can see that it's this bright green layer. So that's an armature layer. And if you click anywhere on that layer, it's going to select the entire armature, and you'll be able to change the properties of that armature within the properties panel. So there's a number of different things here that are neat. One of them is you can choose easing types. So you can do simple, slow, medium, and fast. You can do stop and start and so forth. You can also apply strength to it, which is going to impact how it moves when it's tween between poses. Additionally, you'll notice here in the options we have author time armatures and we have runtime armatures. So if you're dealing with exporting to HD video, you're going to just want to deal with author time. However, if you are... Okay, that's fine. If you are going ahead and targeting something like Flash Player, you can choose runtime. And it's angry because I have an additional pose in here. So if there's different poses, it wants you to actually use author time because it's going to try to tween between those different poses. They act very much like keyframes. We don't want that for runtime animation. We want to be able to select runtime. So you'll notice that this changed a lot here. Now we have a little man above the keyframe, which shows that it's user controlled. And this only works inside of an ActionScript 3 document type. So if you try this inside of like HTML5 canvas or whatever, it's not going to work. However, if I go ahead and export my SWF, so here it is. There's absolutely no animation going on here. However, I'm able to actually grab and manipulate the different poses inside of my SWF here. So that is, I think, something pretty neat to point out to you all. Of course, HD video, it's going to render everything between poses. So you're going to want to make sure to not use that, to use author time for your projects. You can also change the style of how the bones show up. The default is solid, but you can choose wire. You can choose lines or just none, and it won't show any bones. So again, solid is the default if you want to use the default. All right, so let's talk about how you would actually perform animation on an armature layer. So what you use for this, they're basically keyframes, but in an armature layer, they're called poses. So what we would do is, you can see here is a pose, and we can actually copy that pose. We can paste other poses, or we can even just simply go somewhere else on the timeline and manipulate kind of how things look. And you can see it creates an additional pose for us right there, signified by the little diamond, right? And if we play this back, then we can view the animation, the tweening that takes place between these two poses. So let's make that a little more apparent here and play. There we go. So that's where, like, if I go back into the properties panel here, you can see our easing and so forth, and our springiness takes place here. And you can actually go ahead and change the springiness of each individual bone. So if we take the strength and the damping up, and you probably, again, Connect is so, it doesn't have the highest frame rate, right, when it transmits visual data. But you might be able to see that. It's got like a little bit of springiness to it. It gives it a little bit more realism. So it's something to definitely futz around with if you are looking for something like that. So that is a pose. Let's say that I go ahead and maybe create another pose down here where it reaches down into the earth. Hey, reaches down into the earth. Dude. Oh, you know what's happening? So I've got those constraints on there. So it's getting, I think, angry with the different constraints I have. There's this one at the elbow here. That's okay. We'll do something else. Here, it'll go out straight on this pose right here. And then what if we want to go all the way back to the initial pose? Well, that's easy enough to do because we can just select that pose, right click and choose copy pose. And then on frame 45, we can say paste pose. Select. Selecting the entire armature, which I don't want. There we go. Paste pose. And something got messed up. I think I pasted the pose across the entire armature, which obviously I don't want to do. There we go. Okay. Now if we go ahead and select that pose, copy pose, paste pose. There we go. So now if I go ahead and I want to loop this, when we play it back, you can see it's going to just kind of go back and reset itself and do a continual loop like this the whole time. So we have a nice spastic skeletal tree going on. All right, let's pause that and turn off that playback loop. All right, so that's the basics of working inside of Bones. Here is the last thing I want to show. This is basically something that I created back on week 1, and it's a very simple animation that I've used across Facebook and Twitter in order to just kind of like notify people that the live class is going to start. And people have expressed an interest in it, so I figured it's the last week of the live class, so I would just show it really quickly. As you can see, it's a very, very simple animation. It just has the animate logo here, which is a movie clip symbol instance. And then we have Animate CC as text, which is also text, which has been created as a movie clip symbol instance, and the hashtag Adobe Gen Pro, treated likewise, right? So what I'm doing here is obviously I've got some blur on here and I've got some alpha going on. So here's my blur settings. My alpha is down to 0. We do a motion tween on that movie clip symbol till we get to here. And I take the blur down to 0. I bump the alpha up to 100. And then the logo is basically all set. Then we have these two little tweens where these two text-based movie clip symbols kind of come in and go away from there. And that's just simple alpha tweening with some Y position tweening, right? And that's it. And then I extend this out to a number of different frames. And I actually exported this out as both an animated GIF for Twitter, because Twitter likes animated GIFs. And I exported it as HD video for Facebook, because Facebook tends to like videos more. And, you know, I'm able to hit all these different devices and platforms and so forth with my message. So that's really all there is to that. And I see we have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to stop my demo recording and we can do whatever else is necessary for the class.